Hurricane Michael ripped through the Florida Panhandle 6 years ago. Mayor Margo Anderson's book reveals what really happened in Lynn Haven. 600 pages with actual FBI investigation memos and much more. The foreword is written by Guy Lewis, a Fox News contributor who oversaw all federal prosecutors under Attorney General John Ashcroft nearly 20 years ago. He represented James Finch, the longtime contractor hit with bogus charges so absurd that 2 juries rejected them. It didn't take long for the second jury to return a not guilty verdict. Margo's book is a journey of legal treachery that will shock the conscience of every American. Order your copy today of Hurricane Michael, Storm of Corruption at Amazon.com. Or you can pick up a copy in Lynn Haven at Victoria's Last Bite. Sponsored by my friend Ryan, the AC doctor, for all your air conditioning needs. All right, as you can see, this show is a hot one. Maybe the craziest story I've ever told you. All right, and I'm going to show it to you. And it's relevant because of recent developments, such as Matt Gaetz being tapped by President-elect Trump to be the next Attorney General of the United States, overseeing all justice departments. It's relevant because Chris Forehand, who owns Panhandle Engineering, continues to get gigantic contracts from municipalities, especially in Bay County, even though he was given immunity for committing a federal crime against the city of Lynn Haven. Now, we don't know what it is because the local U.S. Attorney's Office, branch of the Justice Department that went after Margo Anderson, the mayor, and James Finch, the contractor, trying to put Margo Anderson in prison for more than 1,000 years. This U.S. Attorney's Office under the Justice Department they gave immunity for a federal crime, never told us what it was, and the person who got immunity, the city contracted engineer at Lynn Haven and other municipalities, according to what I see, and I'm going to show you the court document that was filed, public record, but you've never seen it, was given immunity, and he didn't have to do anything for it. It's unheard of. There are 2 kinds of immunity. One is a blanket immunity forever. Another one is you better do what we tell you to do, or if we get an independent tip, we can still come after you. Okay, and that's the one 95% of the time people get. I don't know which one Chris Forehand got because there's still a lot of secrecy around it. But it's pretty effing shocking that nobody, aside from the Beacon of Bay County, of course, but it's kind of shocking that nobody asks questions about it. And it, quite frankly, maybe is because it's too scary to bring it up, because clearly the protection racket runs very, very, very high. But now, I mean, the big news today is, as the Trump administration prepares to take the executive branch, many of the prosecutors and FBI, who couldn't find any wrongdoing anywhere ever, are lawyering up. And you see the title of the show. It says that Matt Gaetz said that Chris Forehand's federal defense attorney in the Lynn Haven corruption case, his name is David McGee, he tried to extort Congressman, well, not anymore, Attorney General, if he gets nominated, if he gets confirmed, that he says that Chris Forehand's defense attorney, David McGee, tried to extort his father for $25 million. I am going to show you Matt Gaetz say that on Tucker Carlson's show. I am going to show you the letter that Chris Forehand's attorney sent or rather, that the U.S. Attorney's Office sent to James Finch and Margot's attorney saying, look, you all can subpoena Chris Forehand if you want, but he's just going to plead the fifth. And besides that, we're giving him immunity. He doesn't have to say anything. And actually, the letter goes on to say that whatever he says might not be consistent with what he had said earlier. Remember, you go to prison if you make a misstatement to the FBI. And the prosecutors in this case said, we understand that maybe he didn't say what he would say if we give him immunity, but that's all right. I'm going to show you all this crazy stuff tonight. Might be the crazy to find out what you're never going to hear anywhere else. Not just here, but you're going to see court documents and actual statements by possibly the next Attorney General of the United States. You're going to see all of this. And I'll explain to you why it is that Matt Gaetz says that Chris Forehand's attorney tried to extort his father, Don Gaetz, who used to be, by the way, Don Gaetz was the Senate president in the state of Florida. He just won, and he termed out. I believe he termed out. But evidently you're allowed to run again, and he just won again. So Don Gaetz, the very experienced legislator, will be back in the Florida legislature. So all of this has made this important for me to tell you. And so I must. So let's do this because I don't want to break the flow once we get going. Let's thank those of us who helped me do this, and we'll get right to it. Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777.
Have you received a speeding ticket for which you want no points placed onto your driving record? I'm El Saline, 850-215-0628. Let me help you.
You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome.
All right, so let's do this. Let me first show you who they are. This is Matt Gaetz. He was the congressman from Pensacola, and he has been tapped by President-elect Trump to be the next Attorney General of the United States, overseeing all of the U.S. attorneys. And that's his father, Don Gaetz, who has been elected back into the Florida Senate. That's who they are, Pensacola. Here's Chris Forehand. He is the owner of Panhandle Engineering. He is the engineer, the city contracted engineer for Lynn Haven and other municipalities. He was given immunity in the Lynn Haven corruption case, and it's quite a story. People say, how did he have so much protection? Well, he had a very powerful attorney. He had David McGee. That's David McGee. Now, let's take a closer look at David McGee. All right. So now he is with the Beggs and Lane law firm in Northwest Florida. Let's take a look. All right. This is from their website. David McGee has an extraordinary range of experience in matters before federal courts. He has practiced law for more than 46 years. Prior to going into private practice, he served for 6 years as the first assistant. That means he was second in charge. He would have been like Larry. I mean, he was before Larry Keefe, but you know, Larry Keefe was the U.S. attorney, and then it was Jason Cootie. He would have been number 2 before that happened. All right. And it says for 7 years, he did that as the lead attorney. He was the lead prosecutor for a United States Department of Justice organized crime task force. The guy that Matt Gaetz claims tried to extort Don Gaetz for $25 million was the lead prosecutor for the U.S. Justice Department for an organized crime task force. He has extensive experience in complex litigation, both in the civil and criminal arena and in courts throughout the United States. His litigation experience includes complex healthcare billing cases, large construction projects, environmental enforcement, tax cases, and hundreds of securities cases. All right, that's who David McGee is. Now, let me show you what Matt Gaetz said on Tucker Carlson's show about 3 years ago. So he had just been accused. You remember the attacks on Matt Gaetz as a congressman. He had been accused of underage sex with a woman or something. And now, and then you had others who blew it up to like trafficking. I'm going to try to keep it fairly without saying certain things, but you know what I'm talking about. And Matt Gaetz, of course, hated by many on the left and many who are anti-Trump Republicans. So you would think if they had the evidence on him for the past 3 years, they would have got him. So they didn't. And now he might be the next attorney general. So let's take a look at what he said the day that news came out and consider with an open mind. This might be a very important thing to say, because I know that when we talk about these things, I don't have this problem, because my allegiance is not to the Republicans, not to the Democrats, none of that. All right. I'm an independent. So I don't have this issue. But if you do, this might be challenging, but I'm going to challenge you to look at this and ask yourself. So the New York Times was leaked that story the day before the FBI was supposed to, the local FBI was supposed to have a wiretap to prove that the extortion was happening. But the New York Times came out with the story. Matt Gaetz went on Tucker Carlson that very night, and this happened.
It is a horrible allegation, and it is a lie. The New York Times is running a story that I have traveled with a 17-year-old woman, and that is verifiably false. People can look at my travel records and see that that is not the case. What is happening is an extortion of me and my family involving a former Department of Justice official. On March 16th, my father got a text message demanding a meeting wherein a person demanded $25 million in exchange for making horrible sex trafficking allegations against me go away. Our family was so troubled by that, we went to the local FBI. And the FBI and the Department of Justice were so concerned about this attempted extortion of a member of Congress that they asked my dad to wear a wire, which he did with the former Department of Justice official. Tonight, I am demanding that the Department of Justice and the FBI release the audio recordings that were made under their supervision and at their direction, which will prove my innocence and that will show that these allegations aren't true. They're merely intended to try to bleed my family out of money. And this former Department of Justice official tomorrow was supposed to be contacted by my father so that specific instructions could be given regarding the wiring of $4.5 million as a down payment on this bribe. I don't think it's a coincidence that tonight, somehow, the New York Times is leaking this information, smearing me, and ruining the investigation that would likely result in one of the former colleagues of the current DOJ being brought to justice for trying to extort me and
my family. So the obvious question now that Tucker needs to ask is what? Who is this former Justice Department official that is attempting to extort your father Florida Senator Don Gaetz. Who is it? Remember, this is 3 years ago. Who is it, Matt? Who is this?
My family.
So a couple of obvious questions that come to mind. And again, just to restate, this just happened. Don't have any other information beyond what we've already said and you have said. First of all, who is this Department of Justice former employee who's trying to extort the money from you, you say?
His name is David McGee. He was a top official in the leadership in the Northern District of Florida as a prosecutor. He currently works at the Beggs and Lane law firm. As a matter of fact, one of the recordings that was made at the FBI and Department of Justice request occurred at that law firm. And the money that was supposed to be paid today that would have shown even more evidence of David McGee's work in this extortion scheme, that was foiled by the New York Times story. And I believe that's why this horrible information and these terrible allegations have been used this evening.
Wow. That's a pretty big deal, don't you think? So, do I know that that is true? No. How could I know? But I've wanted to tell you this for a long time, and there are reasons that I haven't. But I have to now. First of all, it's extremely dangerous. It's extremely dangerous to tell you this. And again, David McGee is or was Chris Forehand's defense attorney. So Chris Forehand was savvy enough in the Lynn Haven corruption investigation to get David McGee as his defense attorney, knowing that David McGee used to be colleagues with the prosecutors who were going after Margot and James. That's a really strong pick. You got to hand it to Chris Forehand. He had a very, very strong pick. So and again, Margot's book covers this. I think it's chapter 6, I believe, where she shows a lot of stuff about the city contracted engineer Chris Forehand and what actually went down. It's on sale at Amazon.com. Best-selling new release, and for obvious reasons. So when I started to know that this was a persecution and that there was an unbelievably large cover-up was when I went to the federal courthouse, and James Finch's attorney and Margot Anderson's attorney, they subpoenaed Chris Forehand at an evidentiary hearing. And 2 days before the evidentiary hearing, the prosecutors sent Finch and Margot Anderson's lawyer this letter. Oops, that's not the right letter. This letter. Now, this is public record, and it is from the main prosecutor, Andrew Grogan, and it is to Guy Lewis and Rob Vizina and their assistants. Those are the attorneys for James Finch and Margot Anderson. And the prosecutor, Grogan, says, "Dear counsel, we learned from David McGee that you have subpoenaed Forehand to testify at the evidentiary hearing on March 31st, 2022. We have produced to you a report." So when they found out, they hurried up and interviewed him. And they said, "Here's an interview of what he told us." Okay, you do not need to put him in front of Judge Walker and grill him. Okay, we've already asked him questions, says the prosecutors. We've produced a report of a subsequent interview of Mr. Forehand. In conjunction with the interview, David McGee indicated to us that Mr. Forehand would not answer questions about the world claim matter and would invoke his Fifth Amendment rights if questioned by you defense attorneys about the same during testimony. David McGee has further indicated to us, remember, they used to work together at the prosecutor's office, that there may be some inconsistency between Forehand's testimony and world claim. All right, maybe what he says might be different than what he had said before if he was immunized. And what David McGee believes Michael White's testimony might be. We have asked David McGee, the prosecutor for Chris Forehand, for a more specific proffer. Okay, what do you want specifically to keep Chris Forehand out of trouble for committing a federal crime against the city of Lynn Haven and the federal government? Counsel declined to provide the same. In other words, David McGee said, I ain't giving you jack, man. Don't you remember? I used to be over there. Used to be number 2. I ain't giving you anything. Indicating, are you ready for this? It would not be helpful to the government. In other words, 2 days before Finch's attorney and Margot's attorney were going to put Chris Forehand on the witness stand in front of Mark Walker, the prosecutors protected Chris Forehand with their former colleague, his defense attorney, David McGee. And they said, listen, Guy Lewis and Margot's attorney, Rob Vizina, listen, guys, first of all, even if you get him up there, he's just going to plead the 5th. Secondly, we're going to give him immunity. Even though his answers probably won't help prosecutors. And they might be different than what he said before about Margot. So if he goes up there, he might say something different. And it's probably not going to help us any, says the prosecutors 2 days before the evidentiary hearing. We are currently in the process of granting Forehand immunity. We will notify you when and if we obtain additional information about Mr. Forehand. Now, I spoke with Chris Forehand. He was nice enough to invite me into his office a year ago or so, maybe a little longer. I don't know, something like that. And he told me, yes, indeed, he has full immunity for the world claim. Remember, there were like 5 different gigantic crimes that the U.S. attorneys, the federal prosecutors, claimed Margot and James were involved in. Let's take a look at something. Here's how WMBB wrote about it after James Finch's attorney, Guy Lewis, filed a motion. So what you are seeing here are not necessarily facts, but they are what James Finch's attorney, who submitted this on behalf of Mayor Margot Anderson and James Finch, this was their argument. And WMBB is reporting it. Forehand is essential to the world claim conspiracy. That was the insurance adjustment where Chris Forehand and was able to connect Michael White with this insurance adjuster who gave free insurance adjustment services to Commissioner Dan Russell, who was mentioned in an indictment for free. Margot Anderson paid for the service. Dan Russell did not, but they never, ever arrested him. In fact, he was rewarded and became the mayor. Oh my, until Jesse Nelson was elected. All right. Even though he didn't pay anything, and his insurance adjustment led to a $75,000 payout by his insurance company. So there was all kinds of kickbacks, cash, bribery, all kinds of stuff alleged in the indictment. But they never went after the rest of them. So it says Forehand is essential to the world claim conspiracy, participating in kickbacks and cash payments to public officials and bribing former city manager Michael White to award a FEMA monitoring contract to Tetra Tech. Tetra Tech was a national company, is a national company that comes in, and they were monitoring the debris removal. Okay. And they were housed in Chris Forehand's office. This is a whole another branch of crimes that was part of the Lynn Hair, and there were real crimes. So Tetra Tech comes in on Chris Forehand's recommendation, or Michael White gets them in, And then Chris Forehand gives them an office in his big office and starts up a company to remove debris. And the company he brought in and houses is the one that counted the debris for Chris Forehand's new company. And not only that, listen to this. Tetra Tech is a California-based consulting and engineering firm that was retained by the city of Lynn Haven to provide monitoring services following Hurricane Michael. To date, Tetra Tech has received over $5 million in fees from Lynn Haven after former city manager Michael White awarded Tetra Tech with the FEMA monitoring contract in 2019. Forehand is now senior management for Tetra Tech. This was in 2022. But while others, this is again WMBB's story here, but while others have faced multiple criminal charges in the case, and Anderson and Finch are in the midst of fending off their charges, Forehand has been offered immunity from prosecutors. You get immunity when you have committed a crime. You don't get immunity if you haven't committed a crime. You get immunity if you help, if you give information, if you cooperate with the prosecutors. In this case, the prosecutor said he doesn't have to cooperate. Our guy, David McGee, our former guy, David McGee, who is now his defense attorney, that Matt Gaetz said 3 years ago, tried to extort Senator Don Gaetz of $25 million to make the false allegations of underage affair go away. For $25 million, we can make it go away. That's what Matt Gaetz said. Now, I, for one, hope that things go as they should. And one day we find out what the hell really happened. I'm reporting to you what's in the court documents, what I saw in the courthouse, what I've learned through interviews, and what I just showed you, and I'll show you again before I sign out. So again, Chris Forehand continues to get gigantic contracts, and James Finch, city manager Vicky Gaynor, and others, along with Chris Forehand, James Finch is suing Chris Forehand and the city of Lynn Haven because they conspired so that James Finch, who has the lowest prices, the best service, and the DOT has pre-qualified at the highest amount. The DOT loves James Finch because he's pre-qualified at the highest amount. But the city of Lynn Haven conspired to keep him from getting any other contracts and continued to give them to Chris Forehand, who got immunity from David McGee, who Matt Gaetz says tried to extort his father for $25 million. Is this unbelievable or no? So when you try to wrap your head around, first of all, you got to get the book. Get Margot's book at Amazon. I think she covers this in chapter 6. But this is unbelievable. This is why I went from in 2020 believing that she and Finch committed crimes because I was being lied to knowing for sure that they did not. I went through everything. It's amazing. The craziest story I ever saw in my life. And this is pretty crazy, no? So when I saw that President-elect Trump tapped Matt Gaetz, I thought, whoa, he could end up running the United States Justice Department. He's probably going to be able to find out who he might be able to hear those tapes. Let me play that part for you one more time before I sign off. I think this is everything. Okay, yeah, let's go back to 3 years ago when the New York Times ran a story about Matt Gaetz, that Matt Gaetz went on the Tucker Carlson show and said this. All right, I couldn't believe it when I saw this. to be one of the prosecutors.
It is a horrible allegation, and it is a lie. The New York Times is running a story that I have traveled with a 17-year-old woman, and that is verifiably false. People can look at my travel records and see that that is not the case. What is happening is an extortion of me and my family involving a former Department of Justice official. On March 16th, my father got a text message demanding a meeting wherein a person demanded $25 million in exchange for making horrible sex trafficking allegations against me go away. Our family was so troubled by that, we went to the local FBI. And the FBI and the Department of Justice were so concerned about this attempted extortion of a member of Congress that they asked my dad to wear a wire, which he did with the former Department of Justice official. Tonight, I am demanding that the Department of Justice and the FBI release the audio recordings that were made under their supervision and at their direction, which will prove my innocence and that will show that these allegations aren't true. They're merely intended to try to bleed my family out of money. And this former Department of Justice official tomorrow was supposed to be contacted by my father so that specific instructions could be given regarding the wiring of $4.5 million as a down payment on this bribe. I don't think it's a coincidence that tonight, somehow, the New York Times is leaking this information, smearing me, and ruining the investigation that would likely result in one of the former colleagues of the current DOJ being brought to justice for trying to extort me and my family.
So a couple of obvious questions that come to mind, and again, just to restate, this just happened, don't have any other information beyond what we've already said and you have said. First of all, who is this Department of Justice former employee who's trying to extort the money from you, you say?
His name is David McGee. He was a top official in the leadership in the Northern District of Florida as a prosecutor. He currently works at the Beggs and Lane law firm. As a matter of fact, one of the recordings that was made at the FBI and Department of Justice request occurred at that law firm. And the money that was supposed to be paid today that would have shown even more evidence of David McGee's work in this extortion scheme, that was foiled by the New York Times story. And I believe that's why this horrible information and these terrible allegations have been used this evening.
That's unbelievable. So, hey, by the way, I got a tip today. I can't believe, and I'm going to end up telling you about it. But the way I got it, somebody wanted my undivided attention for 30 minutes, and so she booked a call. And I want to let you know how you can do the same. I'm sorry that I'm not always available and completely attentive, but I've made it so that I can be. And so you can book a call, and here's how to do it at calendly.com/Bernie Thompson. 30 minutes or 60 minutes. I'm only going to do 6 of them a week. But if you, and it doesn't have to just be, by the way, about a tip. It can be about anything. It can be, I want to talk about journalism. I want to learn about public records. I want to talk about your outdoor gear that you take in the woods. Anything. In fact, I'd love to have some of those. Just talk about that stuff for a while. But calendly.com/Bernie Thompson. And boy, did I learn something that I'll just tell you a hint. There is a real culture of hit and runs covered up by law enforcement in Bay County. And it's not just Police Chief Ricky Ramey. All right, that's probably too much of a hint. I shouldn't have even done that. I also want to thank those of you who help by becoming a patron by saying, Bernie, here's a tip, as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/Bernie Thompson. By becoming a patron, you also get the behind-the-scenes videos that I send out to paid subscribers to Substack and Patreon. Patreon.com/Bernie Thompson. It's anonymous, it's easy, and you can quit at any time. Of course, I want to thank the Unknown Patriot for sponsoring the show as well. And with that, I cannot believe this show. I don't know how many people are going to see it, but I'm certain that not enough are going to see it. I hope that you will hit the like button and do all you can to make sure more people start to get an understanding about why things went the way they went, why some people got protection, why some people continue to get big contracts. But as Bob Dylan said, times they are changing.